Hey guys, I want to share the tragic story of Kaden Ingram. He is the boy, 12 years old, that was shot and killed in Chicago by his own mother. He had refused to give his mother a memory card, and she got angry and she shot him. And when he was lying on the ground dying, she stood over him and shot him again and finished him off. And she confessed to the crime. And now the father of the boy is coming out and defending the mother, saying that mental illness is real. And while I do not deny that mental illness is real, it's amazing when you look at what people call mental illness. And let me just preface this by saying this. I believe there's a lot more spiritual things to mental illness than people are willing to admit. It's amazing that mental illness is not causing people to go out and do random good to others, right? It's amazing when people talk about mental illness, it is not somebody giving Christmas presents to everybody and running out all their money. That's not the mental illness that we see. We see mental illness associated with violence, sex, suicide, abuse, lying, psychotic behavior. And what we have is this. When the father, let's just go back into the core of what the issue is. The first thing that we have is a situation where we have a mother that is emotionally outbalanced, right? She's emotionally unbalanced. And the reason that we have that is because we have a society that has not grown to accept and understand what parenthood really is. And we have a situation where let's accept the premise that mental illness is real. If we know that somebody is battling mental illness and mental illness causing them to go to extreme fits of rage, why is that person responsible for a child? That's the first thing. Why is that person watching our boys? Now, we already know in the black community that our boys are already in trouble. They are already behind the 8 ball. And in many cases, many of them grow up messed up. Many of them are born messed up by being addicted to things, messed up because the father is nowhere to be found, messed up because they don't know who the father is. Many of them have diseases that have been passed on because the mother is messed up. Then when they get raised up in a household that's messed up. Mothers don't even want to put together the cribs that they're supposed to have. Dads don't even want to watch them. Many of the children are dying by shaken baby syndrome or being rolled over by their mothers. That's an epidemic of things that happen like that in Milwaukee. On top of that, you get to the point where they're older and they're abandoned. A lot of them are sexually abused. A lot of them are physically abused. A lot of them skip out on school. A lot of them go to terrible schools. And, if you talk to a teacher, and listen, I don't fully absolve the teachers, but when you talk to a teacher and you talk to the public school system, a lot of them throw up their hands because the truth of the matter is, to properly run our schools, you would need a lot stronger discipline than what we have. But the problem is, if you were to discipline the kids, that discipline would only last while they're at school, because when they go home, it's the wild, wild west. Nobody's watching them. And when they are being watched, they're being watched by somebody that everybody is admitting is mentally unstable. And you got to say, if we're not going to hold the mother accountable, which we should, right? She murdered her own son. If we're not going to hold the mother accountable, then we have to hold the father accountable. And if we're not going to hold the father accountable, we have to hold the family accountable. And if we're not going to hold the family accountable, we have to hold society accountable. Who murdered the boy? It was the mother. And mental illness is not an excuse, because here's the thing. We have lots of solutions to mental illness. Now, I believe that most of the things that people talk about mental illness, they are actually spiritual influences and evil spirits that are pushing people to do things. But here's the thing. Mental illness, spiritual influences, they don't push you to do something you didn't want to do already, right? Somebody who is drunk and fills up a lady, they ain't gay, right? You're not going to do something that you didn't have an inclination to do in the first place. So when somebody talks about mental illness or spiritual influence, that's not an excuse. So the mother is guilty, and we need to acknowledge this mother is guilty, and she's a terrible mother. There is no worse you can do as a mother than to murder your own children, That's the first point that we ought to say. But the father is guilty. Why is the father guilty? Because he had a child with somebody who is in no condition to take care of that child. For him to get up there and say mental illness is real means he knew that there was a problem and he watched it happen. So he could have done something. Now, if you might say, and I get it, we're a men's channel, and you might say to yourself, hey, man, men are not empowered to truly be fathers. And I don't disagree with you. But if we're going to say that, and he made no objection, he didn't make his case, he still is at fault. Is he as guilty as the mother? No, he's not as guilty, but he is guilty. He will stand before God and be condemned because as a man, he didn't insist. And that's the problem that I have with many of you men. Many of you men will point out the problems with female nature. You will point out the problems with our women in society. And I definitely agree with you. But then you don't take none of the onus on yourselves. You don't take none of the onus to insist on anything. I was watching the lead attorney's show, and there was a man on there who was making excuses for Tasha K's apology, a weak apology. And at the end of the day, the point that the lead attorney said so pointedly was this. The reason that many women are not held accountable is because men don't hold them accountable. They're afraid. Men, you can't be afraid if you want to be leaders. That is literally the opposite of the motivation of leading. The feeling that motivates leading is courage, not cowardice. And if you are afraid to hold people accountable, you will not be a good leader. You cannot be a good leader. So the father is guilty. The family is guilty because they had to know. And a lot of times when we deal with situations like this, we have people who are acting like they didn't know until all of a sudden everybody admits we all knew. It reminds me of situations where somebody shoots up a school and somebody say, yeah, we all kind of saw it happening. Why didn't y'all do nothing? So you waited until after all these people are dead. And now we say, man, we really should have did something. Do something now. And then society is at fault because we allow these things to happen. We allow these messed up family situations to happen, and we don't empower the fathers to step into lives. We don't empower families to step in. We don't empower anybody to impose shame in these situations. And because there is no shame, these situations will continue. Because anytime that somebody can raise a child and do something like this and everybody doesn't rise up and condemn them, there's not enough shame in society. Bring shame back because it's needed. Without shame, we lose lives.